I was asked to do a little video demonstrating my method for deflection testing. I love jigs, and I built this elaborate jig here to keep track of the deflection on both the tops and the backs of my guitars, as well as brace stock. So this is a multifunction jig, and the way deflection testing works, is it's as simple as this. You're holding wood in a between two spacers, and you're putting a point load on there, and you're measuring how much it moves. It's as simple as that. When I say a point load, you could do it with a bar too. I happen to like a point load better because I think it represents cross grain and long grain deflection more accurately with one reading. So I'll just put a top in here and sort of walk you through it. Say I'm thicknessing this top. Here it is, it's sanded smooth on the front side, and all the wood I'm going to remove will be coming off the back. Because once you arrive at the number you want, you don't want to do a whole bunch more sanding on it, because that will change it. Just a few thousandths of an inch less wood makes a big difference in the deflection. So this device has this piston, which is attached a dial indicator and a weight to press the piston down. And it's held, I happen to have these bars, I think they're 8 inches apart, center to center. I put the top in, I lower the piston down onto the spot where the bridge is going to be, right in the middle of the guitar, and I have this weight. And this, with the dial indicator, shows me how much the wood has moved. In this case, 71 thousandths of an inch. Deflection testing is not like a magical recipe that's going to get you perfect guitars, but what it is a way of keeping track of what you've done in the past and being able to apply it to the future, to future builds. It requires that. One of the reasons I built a jig instead of just setting up some rigmarole thing is that it's the same every single time. You want the distance between the supports to be the same every single time. You want the point that puts the load onto the top to be the same, and you want the same amount of weight every time. So you build this jig, that's your jig for life. But you could do it with just a board with a couple of slats of wood on it, and a piece of metal, and a couple straight edges. You could measure this with a straight edge or with shims. It doesn't have to be this ridiculously fancy. But I'll show you why I made it this fancy. So I've got a reading now on this top, and I would take it over to my drum sander and thin it a little bit until I reached my target of, say, 90 thousandths of an inch of deflection. As I said, that's just with this rig. So the reason you do this is that different species have different flexibilities, different trees have different flexibilities, and if you'd use just thickness as a way to determine how thick your tops are, you're going to get wildly different results. Like cedar is much more flexible than most spruces, so if they're all 90 thousandths of an inch, if you just say, I'm going to make my tops 90 thousandths of an inch, that's a nice round number, well, the cedar's going to move a lot more than the spruce. And it's hard enough to make guitars with all these variables swimming around. If you can get your thicknessing down to where that is a controlled aspect of the build, you have a much better chance of being able to hone in on what does what when you change different things like bracing location, bracing species, the weight of the bridge, all these different things. Now, in addition to being able to test the tops and backs, these spacers come out, and I can take these off and put whole guitars under here, held in this cradle. And once the guitar is glued together, this gives me a final chance to alter the way the top vibrates in a measurable way. So I do the same thing. I put the piston on here, set it to 0, and I check the deflection now that the top has braces and it's glued to the body, to the sides. And if it's too stiff, I can actually thin around the bouts here and get it to where I want it to be. The fact is that if you get your deflection process pretty accurate, you get really consistent results, which is, of course, the whole idea of doing that. But like I said, this allows me to have consistent results with the guitar, because it's really, I mean, we're just groping around there, right? There's so many variables, it's insane. So this is one thing that I can control for sure in an objective rather than subjective way. It certainly doesn't replace feeling the wood, tapping the wood, listening to the wood, and just having a general affinity for your building materials, but it's one thing that gives you a chance of producing consistently decent guitars. So there it is, the world's most Baroque deflection jig. Hope that was helpful.